Hello, friends.
Hey, mamas.
Welcome to My Invisible Disease podcast. We are here to share our struggles and hacks as two moms living with chronic illness.
Tune in and join our community as we share stories and experiences while we sort through the ups and downs of living with invisible disease. We've been friends for 14 years. That's a long time. As long as I've known you, you've always had a bad liver. Like, it's been like common knowledge that like Jenny shouldn't be drinking.
Well, that's the outside perspective. Okay. So such a very different experience because this is something that in my family is genetic. My grandfather died of complications with his liver. And he died pretty young. So I remember being a child. And I remember my grandpa, so my mom's dad, died. And he had kidney disease as well. So our disease is called polycystic kidney disease. And then we happen to have an aggressive form of it. And then on top of that, polycystic liver disease. And once again, an aggressive form. So it's a whole encompassing to your whole body, because some people will get cysts on like their spinal cord, on their pancreas, on their ovaries. So like it really can be all over.
What causes the cysts? Like, is it autoimmune driven, or like where does that come from?
So there was a discovery a few years ago that that they discovered the chromosome in the DNA that causes the disease. So obviously I have that chromosome, and then it's different, man. Oh man. Like there's just not a lot of research. There is no cure.
It's very rare, right? Like it is.
Yeah. Like
polycystic
so. Kidney disease is actually very common.
Yeah.
From polycystic kidney, there's an 80% chance if you have it that you're going to go into kidney failure. But just like say the aggressive form and then the aggressive form of the liver disease with it is very rare. So most people with polycystic liver disease don't know they have it. And if they do, it is just so rare to actually need a transplant for it and to actually have to remove the liver. So,
so your liver has continued to grow with like the assistance of cysts, right? Like it's the cysts that are growing, not the liver, or is it both?
It's a cyst. So basically what happens is my organs grow cysts, and then the cysts take over the organ. So for your kidneys, it'll actually kill your kidney function. And then for polycystic liver disease, basically it won't kill my liver function or the actual organ itself, because livers are so resilient. I have very high functioning liver tissue. However, the cysts grow so big that my liver starts to starts to wrap around my stomach. So it'll actually more likely starve me to death than it will for me to die of actual liver failure.
Yeah.
So in the same way, like we'll get into this later, one of the big transitions in my life is within the last few weeks, I've been listed for liver transplant. And looking back on like a 20-year history right now in Canada, in Ontario, in 20 years, they had like 56 liver transplants, surgeries for this disease. And actually, which kind of goes into my story a little bit, is like my mom was the very first person to have a liver transplant at the University of Alberta, which has a huge liver transplant program. It actually services multiple provinces in Canada. But she was the very first to have a liver transplant there for our disease. I mean, and that also just shows progress with technologies and events, because other people just didn't have that option potentially, but it's still extremely rare. Yeah. It was my introduction to the disease, was my mom's experience.
And so you lost your grandfather at a very young age for that. And then you grew up watching your mom struggle with this disease. So like, how did that affect you guys?
I mean, I think kids are so resilient.
Totally.
Very much. I mean, I definitely remember my mom being in bed a lot, my mom being sick a lot, but I think for kids at some point, it's kind of all you know. Like I say, like my first trauma with the disease was when my mom got called for a liver transplant. I was 13, which is crazy because I have an 11-year-old daughter. And I was actually in Winnipeg. So at the time we lived in Sherwood Park. I don't know how long is it from, we took a train, but I mean,
A train?
realistically, it's like a 20-hour drive or something
Yeah.
from Winnipeg to Edmonton. And I was there with my dive team. So I had coaches. There was some parents that were escorts. We were staying in a hotel. We were there for nationals. So it was like a big competition. And my mom got the call while I was there. So she had been listed for 3 years, I believe, at that point.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like I had no way home. And I was 13. We had known this was coming, and I wasn't able to be with my family at that point. And then on top of that, I didn't have a parent or anyone there to like support me through
Talk you through
managing
it.
it. Yeah, it was
As
terrifying.
a kid, you're terrified. Like you're worried about your mom. You want to be there. And like as an empathetic person, which I know you very much are, like I can only imagine how hard that was being a 20-hour drive away from the mayhem.
So I had to compete after that, which was really stressful. But like the other side of it is my experience with the disease was that my grandpa died of it, and that my mom was the first to have this surgery. Like the risk was huge.
Right.
And that was like when I just fucking hated the disease, hated it. But we knew that we had like a 50% chance of getting it. My mom had really made it clear that like it would be something that it's our choice. Our disease in particular is just, it's very late onset. Most people don't get symptoms until their 30s. So, I had the option to live a really normal childhood. I was an extremely active child, which possibly now looking back, likely there was some things in there with my like undiagnosed ADHD that contributed, but fast forward a year and a half, I was airlifted. I had internal bleeding from my liver and kidneys from a snowboarding accident. And without consent, they diagnosed me there. So the nurse had told me. So I was diagnosed at 15. I actually, with my injury, like I had a lacerated liver, my liver split. I had bleeding from my kidneys. It was pretty big. But obviously going through MRIs and different things with that injury, they were able to diagnose that I had multiple cysts on my kidneys. Another thing about diagnosis is with our disease is you could have a kid, even a 15-year-old scanned and them show no signs of it. And it doesn't mean that they're not going to.
They won't get it.
Mm-hmm. It's just different in everybody. And so there's, was hesitation there with my mom of getting it early. So long story short, this disease that had really taken away a little bit of my youth through watching my mom feeling, like really out of control, and that it been so aggressive through my family. I now had this diagnosis at 15 to carry that, likely I would have to experience this as an adult. So, I mean, it wasn't the end of the world. I definitely I'm an optimist. So I also tend to forget about things. So
that's the ADHD.
That's the ADHD. But I lived a pretty normal life, but there was always a voice in the back of my head that I would just try to shut down a little bit, that knew that, this is your fate.
So how do you think that as a teenager, not only are you worrying about getting your first boyfriend, you got your period, you got new boobs, people are starting to party a little bit more. How does that affect the mentality of a teenager being like, wow, one day I am going to get a liver transplant? How was that?
And I feel like our lifestyle was definitely the Canadian common, which was a lot of binge drinking. So we started young, our whole group of friends, everyone we knew. But I think for me that the escapism of it was I could forget easily.
Tomorrow's problem. I don't have to worry about now.
Absolutely. And we drank and stuff, but and I was an athlete. So I was a diver. I was a snowboarder. Yeah, I don't know. It did affect me emotionally. I think there was a lot of kind of suppressed feelings about it, and a lot of disassociation. So even from with my mom, because I didn't get to be there and see it, I think I disassociated a little bit from the experience. And then it continued that when I did receive my own diagnosis, but it was heavy. It was just always knowing that it was in the back of my mind. Also a feeling of my mom has 6 sisters and a brother, and it 50-50. So 4 of the siblings were diagnosed with it and 4 of them weren't.
Wow. That's a big, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah. So we do, like, there is more family history, but like as of right now, I'm going to be, oh my God, 38. I can't remember my age, but
I'm 36.
I'm
I
84.
think yeah.
I'll be 38 this year. Yeah. And, but like, I don't know, other than my sister, like, and I, within our family, I don't know of like anyone that's been diagnosed. And like, I have like a bajillion cousins. So it's like I think there was always a weird thing for me that like, not that I was like, not the black sheep, but like the one that got the diagnosis.
Lucky you.
Lucky
You
me.
win.
Yay, right? So just moving forward, I think I was pretty naive. My mom was great with like, she kind of trained us up for it. We ate low sodium. We drank a shitload of water. My mom was an amazing cook as far as like healthy cooking, and hated it when I was a kid, but I really, my appreciation for all different types of food. She cooked a lot of different cuisines. But like, I had a lot of exposure to healthy food. I love vegetables, and she kind of set us up naturally to stay well because we needed to,
Right.
and were like at risk of, disease.
100%.
So I grew up kind of preparing that way, but then I think I was kind of naive because even I started seeing specialists early monitoring, that type of thing, but that they were like, oh, this will never affect you. Like,
Yeah.
or it could never affect you. You have no symptoms. Like, you're all good. This likely, you won't have the same experience as your family or as your mom. And this all goes back to medical doctors can only speak to their own experience. That was a very naive thing to say, but most kidney doctors at the time were dealing with other diseases, not necessarily polycystic kidney or someone so young. So yeah, like fast forward, young, partying, got married, everything seemed all good, no symptoms. I thought, I beat the system. Really thought I was just going to be healthy, stay healthy forever. And that this was encouraged. We talked to my kidney specialist about pregnancy before we decided to start trying for a kid, and no, that won't affect your disease. Yeah, I just had no symptoms. Continue to fast forward to me having kids, and the progress of my disease was just insane. So
when do you think things started changing?
Well, now I know from my own personal research, from connecting with other people internationally with my disease, is that pregnancy significantly grows cysts for women on their liver. In addition to that, birth control, which I was on for, 10 years, can contribute to liver cyst growth. So all these things that like, no one told me, but it's because no one knew. It just, people weren't educated on my disease. There's not a lot of research. It's not a big money maker. So it wasn't information that was widespread through the specialists that I was seeing. And, same thing, like, what if I didn't go on birth control? Multiple pregnancies, women have gone into kidney failure. They needed liver transplants because it's grown their cysts hormonally, so many different things. So, I really didn't see symptoms develop until after having kids, and it just wasn't information that was shared with me or that I understood moving into that situation. And it really all started with high blood pressure. That's something that's manageable.
Like, how did it feel? Like you just had like lightheadedness mostly, or like how did you know that you had high blood pressure?
For me, it was anxiety. I developed a lot of anxiety after having my son, so my second child, and no one listened. So I used to go into I would go to the doctor like pretty regularly. And I had we had moved from Alberta to BC, and I had set up myself up with like a nephrologist here. And for 2 years, where I was saying my blood pressure's high, it was undiagnosed. Like, no one was medicating me. My kidney specialist wasn't medicating me for high blood pressure. So high blood pressure can also progress my disease. It's like a chicken and egg, that your disease gives you high blood pressure progresses your disease.
Gotcha.
And so it was my GP, who is a female. She's this obstetrics, like, she was the one that listened. But 2 years after having high blood pressure, And, by that time, that's like 2 years of damage done to my body. And that was a situation where like my specialist wasn't listening to me, and it was so fucking frustrating. And only because like I have family history. So like there was a lot of information that I knew about this disease that he just didn't, from my own lived experience through like this coming through my family. And plus Facebook, like amazing for like connecting with other people. I went
Drop link for our Facebook group below.
Oh yeah. And that's it. Community is so important. And the tips, the tricks, like medication.
You don't know what you don't know.
Studies, research, you don't know what you don't know. And it's like the experience of other people. It was honestly like a guide for me, because not only that, but then I had issues with my period, and I had always had these really heavy periods. Is this tied to my disease? I mean, everyone just said, oh, you have this. Yeah, it's probably connected, but no one ever knew. I've always had gut issues. Like there's so many things. I've had my sinuses reconstructed, my tonsils, my adenoids, all that. Like, is this connected to my gut? Is this connected to my kidneys? Like it is all connected, right? Like, and how that can contribute to triggering disease, how it can, there's just not enough information, and people aren't looking in that direction.
Totally.
But I had naturally, like I had sought out early in life, like when I was like 19, I got diagnosed with leaky gut. Like I was seeing more naturopath type doctors, and really was doing a lot of seeking on my own. My blood pressure was high. I was exhausted, like just completely wiped. I looked like studies were showing my like ferritin and different things were low, and they were suggesting I get on birth control. They were like, well, here, we'll get like a progesterone, like IUD, and I had to come to them with information that I had found on Facebook saying progesterone causes liver cyst growth in people without my disease. I have liver cyst disease. And then they're like, oh, you're right. We shouldn't do that.
How did you not lose like all faith in the medical system at that time?
I did. I literally am in a small town and request not to see the specialist. Like it was just ridiculous. And I get people only know from their own experience. And because it's a hereditary disease, it's really odd because you get clusters of family groupings in certain areas. So you'll have a doctor that's very well versed. And then you have other areas where there's no family lines that have this disease, so they don't see it. It was ignorance, and it was frustrating, and I had to fight against it. I personally wasn't interested in necessarily getting a hysterectomy, but I just didn't know what my options were. They talked about ablation, which is something my mom had, but that, likely that'll lead to a hysterectomy anyway. And then you have kidney disease and blah, 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 blah. So it just all piles up, and they're like, let's take it out. So I had a hysterectomy at 30. Luckily I had both my kids by that time. Once again, it fucked up my hormones. So I did keep my ovaries because I couldn't take them because of my liver disease. They did it for the reasoning of it was damaging my kidneys to have such like heavy periods and to be like anemic. But like, it's just all, a holistic view, but no one's looking at it holistically, which is really frustrating. But yeah, so it started with hysterectomy. That took me a while to recover from. I wish I had learned some other things. I ended up doing some seeding to help recover my hormone health. It's something else I'd like to kind of come back to now, but I wish I had known some of these options before rather than going for such like a dramatic surgery. But once again, it's, you're the mercy to like your own knowledge and the knowledge of the professionals around you. When you're advocating for your health, like it can be frustrating. But basically after that 2 years, my kidney cysts and my liver cysts just continue to grow at a rapid rate. So my kidneys are getting much, much bigger. Like realistically right now, each kidney is about 10 times the size of a normal kidney. So like a normal healthy kidney, each of mine are 10 times the size. So that's all within my abdomen.
So that's crazy. Like you
it
have
takes up a lot of space.
10 times size kidney. And then your liver is like what?
Probably about 3 to 4 times the size of a normal liver, but your liver is like a big organ. So it takes up a lot of space in my abdomen, and it creates a lot of discomfort, a lot of pain. Mhm.
I can imagine that there's like tons of cramping because like I think about when I was pregnant and I had a foreign invader in there and
Mhm.
like there's not that much spare space. Like sure things move and twist and that comes with insane like digestive issues, the
Yeah.
acid reflux,
Mhm.
like just like the crowding, even just like drinking too much
Oh
water
yeah.
like causes
Mhm.
discomfort and like living with that all the time. I can only imagine it's like you don't have an exit strategy. You're not pushing
No.
out the 9 pound baby. Like it's just there every day.
Yes. Pretty much. So I mean,
Like
like that's just, and it's progressive. So it's not like there's a stopping point with it.
your like body is stuffed. Like your organs are all way bigger than they're supposed to be.
Yes.
Um, I
And
also
they're continuing
continue.
to grow. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember this was a trigger for you to get a particular enhancement. How did you come to that conclusion?
So on this line, one thing when my mom had her transplant, which I mean, I was pretty young still. So when she had her liver transplant, she was 45 and I was 13. But my mom, in a similar path, but maybe a different journey. But part of it for her too was she looked about 10 months pregnant by the time. I mean, my mom's 5'2". Like at least I have an extra
Right.
3 inches on her.
A
But
whole 3 inches.
yeah, yeah. But she had this huge liver and this huge abdomen and looked 10 months pregnant by the time she had her transplant at 45. So she couldn't go out in public without people asking, like, when are you due? Or,
Oh,
making comments. So she just stopped going out. And and what's acknowledged, which is amazing, by my hepatologist, who's my liver specialist in Edmonton, is he recognizes, especially for women, this isn't necessarily a killer disease, but it kills your lifestyle and your quality of life. So people live with zero to no quality of life with this disease. And so for my mom, like say she was 5'2", she looked 10 months pregnant, her liver was huge. I think like, and just, it caused her so much mental distress. And it just takes away, like it just consumes you.
it's so
Um,
funny how like something so like minor as like the inconvenience of looking pregnant, but like if
what
you've
the
ever
impact,
had
yeah,
children, you know that
yeah.
like, man, the last thing I want is people
Oh my
to
God.
say
Yeah.
something. And it always comes from this like place of kindness, like, oh, when are you
And
due?
you're like, fuck
But like,
you.
what a dagger, like
Yeah.
just a dagger. Like, I'm not
Hmm.
fucking pregnant. Like,
Hmm. Well,
and
and
yeah,
it's
it's
like,
awkward.
it's one of those things where it's like I was an athlete my entire life. And I mean, realistically, so part of my fear of this disease was also living a life where I looked 10 months pregnant. And it might sound vain, but it's not. It's like the mental distress of it, of it's a physical deformation. Like you're
Yeah.
deformed. Um, and people might think, oh, it's not that bad, but like it's a deformity, and it's, you know, so I mean, for me, part of my like pre knowing this was coming, so my disease had started to escalate, start to get a lot more aggressive. I'd had my hysterectomy, and I made a choice, which I mean, I don't regret by any means. Maybe I would have done it. I don't know what I would have done differently. But for myself, I decided personally to get a breast augmentation. I was the only one in my family that was born without boobs. My sister, my mom, everyone's so well endowed. But I felt like for my body shape and my body type, that I was all my ribs were already sticking out because of the growth in my abdomen further than my boobs. So
I
I did.
mean, you breastfed 2 babies as
Well,
well. So
and I
like they
breastfed
put in
for,
their time.
I know, for like almost 4 years I breastfed. So I was like, you know
Crazy.
what? Well deserved anyhow. But it was an investment in myself. When I was looking in the mirror, all I was seeing was my disease. I was seeing this swollen abdomen, and it just, I didn't want it to take away my power. I didn't want it to take away me. I wanted to see myself in that. And for me, having the augmentation to balance my body, to give me a little bit more time, I guess I'll say, where I could live in a what way that I identified as more normal, not physically looking pregnant, or I could hide it better at least. So, I mean, that was, I guess, like 4 years ago. I can't even remember. See, like these things come and I just let them go.
Yeah. And like on the flip side of it,
yeah,
since I got sick,
yeah,
my body has also changed. And I was like joking to Jesse, like, once again, it comes down to the tits. All I have is boobs. So like, I was like, I could make myself out of Play-Doh and put like 2 giant tits.
Yeah.
And then like poke a couple sticks in, and that's what I look like. Like my little skinny ass arms, my like pinner legs, like all there is boobs. So I like, now there's this like body image issue that I've never had in my entire life.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, I'm vain. I get it. But like,
but you know what I've realized though is it's not vanity. I think it honestly is somewhat just, not that we identify so much, because it wasn't about how other people perceived me as much as it was about what I looked at myself. Because you know what? No one gives a shit.
No.
Like, you know, I don't shave my bikini line and I go to the pool and I feel, and I think if they're going to look at my fucking crotch, they'll see
that's for
hair.
them. Yeah.
That's boohoo to you. You know, it's like, it wasn't about them as far as like everyone and how they see me. It was about how I felt about myself. And I also knew I was on a timeline, because I was, every day I am the healthiest I'm going to be for the rest of my life, like to a certain degree.
Yeah.
On this path until I transplant, because that's the only cure. And even then, transplant is moving from one chronic illness to another. You're moving from being diseased to now being a transplant patient that's on medication the rest of your life, immune suppressed, right? So I knew if I was going to do something, I needed to do it now, because my kidney function was not getting better. My liver disease progression was getting worse. And, you know, and I made the decision for myself and did it. And I'm like, I mean, you know me, I live in sweats. Like it wasn't, no one could even see my boobs if they tried.
But like just what it did for your self-confidence and like,
it was something else to look at in the mirror other than my belly.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because, and I think everyone, there's some dysmorphia, I guess, or what, of looking at yourself in the mirror and not seeing yourself. And I guarantee people that struggle with weight, whether it's too little, too much, people that deal with like deformities on their body, like it just, when you look in the mirror and you don't identify with that person looking back at you, it's a really hard thing. So I kind of did it as preventive measure. Do I care now? Like, no. Do I regret doing it? No, because I think it really has enabled me to hide my abdomen. And so it's saved me some struggle that otherwise I might contain, like I might be suffering right now emotionally and mentally more than I am right now, because of having to not wanting to go out in public. Right. So, and I do get, I mean, like, I'm like, I don't like that person because they asked me if I was pregnant, or like, you know, like I still run into those situations, and that's still territory that I'm managing, because I really did have such fear of that, the body image thing going into it, like watching my mom's journey. But so that's where I'm at. Like things just continue to fucking grow. They just continue to grow. And I'm at this stage where I have no energy left. And that's between like my kidney functions declining as my kidneys grow. I'm still stage 3 kidney disease, which, you know, someone that has kidney disease, it really isn't that bad. But the other thing is I have such huge kidneys that when it does hit me, my decline will be rapid for function. And then my liver's taking over my fucking whole body. Like to see a CT of my body is like, it just makes me want to vomit. And like I say, it's the invisible disease factor. I walk into an ultrasound, they're like, oh, hey, how's it going? And they start to scan my insides and they're like, oh my God, like, are you having are you set up for kidney transplant? And I'm like, no, like can't get a kidney transplant until my function goes. Like, you know, it's one of those things that when people see my ailments, my condition, my body, what's going on the inside of my body compared to like what's going on the outside. Once again, like it's so contrasting. Yeah. You know, it's hard to it's hard to be able to say, like, I'm fucking tired all the time to the point where it affects every aspect of my life. Like, I'm exhausted. Like, now I have so much pressure on my abdomen that if I eat a big meal, I vomit. It's these things that, and then I have to lay down. Like, I have a big dinner and I have to go to bed after, like, I have to sleep for a half hour to recover from the discomfort, the pain, the pressure. It literally like knocks me out. Just to get through like a family dinner. So, with that progress, I also I have a really amazing liver team in Edmonton, and he listens and he advocates for quality of life, because often what happens with people in my disease is their quality of life goes down so significantly. They get so sick and that's when they are listed for transplant. So we're there now that I'm listed.
So you got it on the list officially, 3 weeks ago?
Well, officially approved. I won't be active on the list until the end of October. I still have a few appointments. Like, I've talked to the anesthetist. I have a sleep clinic, which is related, but not related because of the volume in my abdomen. I don't know if it's pressure on my diaphragm or what, but I have major sleep issues. Like, say, it affects every aspect of my life. But I have some appointments before, but I should be actively listed end of October for liver transplant. And that's just step one. Like, that's just, we get my liver out, my kidneys are still fucking huge. I still have kidney disease, right? Like, there's a 10% chance I don't come off the table, and then there's, another chance, there's 50% chance I go into rejection and they have to balance meds. There's a chance that the tissue grafts don't take. And then I'm hooped. So, there's still a lot of risk, and there was a lot of weighing risk to quality of life to get me on the list of I had doctors that their opinion was, well, take the next 5 years, spend that with your family because the risk is too high. At least you get those 5 years. But
well, if I could interject a little bit there, I think that because you have been actively, fighting with your health for at least, let's say, the last decade has been the biggest struggle. One of the things that you've always done so well is looking at how to manage that outside of the medical community. So
Absolutely.
Your dedication to your diet, number one, your dedication to your spiritual journey. I know you've been all about your yoga, and this is a huge asset. And I think that people listening to this are going to be able to learn a lot from you about not only how you implement your meditation practices and all of that kind of stuff. You have done so much research, so much work, and obviously advocating for your own health, that you've helped a lot of people in your community already with health adversities and things like that, because you have so much insight. Plant-based. I remember I came and we came to your house. You're notoriously known in our family as the house that has their own chickens, but oh, can we go see our friends that live on the mountain with the chickens? I was like, yeah, we can. But having such good dialing in on that kind of stuff, those are nutrients and stuff that the average person doesn't subject themselves to. Ryan made us breakfast, and your entire family has kind of adopted your healthy eating habits. I know our kids still eat frozen pizza, and that's great because kids will be kids, but just with all of the different ways that you've educated yourself and implemented and helped other people in your community implement some of these strategies, I think that people are going to be really excited to learn how the heck you've been doing it, and little things that they can do as well to keep not only their physical being, but their spiritual and mental space. Because we've said it before, we got you on the list, you're getting close, but it's a hurry up and wait situation.
It's a hurry up and wait. Yeah.
Now what? Your mom was on the list for 3 years, you said. So is the call coming in 2 weeks, or is it coming in 2 years? You don't know that. And how you continue to check yourself in, I think, is going to be a pretty interesting process.
I'm not rehearsed in sharing this story, because it's kind of been, because for me, this wasn't dramatically progressed, but I knew it was coming for years. So I think I spent my life avoiding like of masking to like not show this side of
Totally.
me, to not, I didn't want people thinking of me as sick, and it's like, and it was so easy because it's invisible disease and it's easy to
Yeah.
hide when you're tired. And I'm not well versed in this story because it's not something that is shared. And I think there's something when you're dealing with shit like this, you feel like it's a burden to share your struggle. And
Totally.
I'm really have come into my own in, I mean, like, especially lately.
Yeah.
But I would say like even with COVID, like um just really, I think a lot of people experience the pandemic, the idea of really having to do a lot more like inner work, and it just was this natural, like you're spending a lot more time alone or like not socializing. And I think for me it gave me a lot of time to really take those practices inward. I mean, I had chosen when we moved to BC from Alberta, it was a pretty big move. I had a baby. And we chose to kind of get out of the rat race, do small town. But I made intentional choices because I knew it's a long run. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so I did things like, rather than stay in finance and kind of that busy world, to slow down. Like I took my yoga teacher training. I've been taking my Reiki master training. This summer I ended up getting like trained as a breathwork facilitator. Like I've done a lot of self-study meditation but I totally think for my mental health and my wellness, like a lot of the healing, even though physically I don't have that control. Like I've been able to do a lot of internal, spiritual, mental, emotional healing because of some of those practices and because I have had time. So then I see people going through this where it's like they're getting hit with it. And it's like there's so much more to us than just our physical experience, that it's, it just because you're going through some of these big challenges in our regular day-to-day life world, but that there's still space for like joy, there's still space for gratitude, there's still space for be able to heal. And it just isn't always, in my case, which I'm sure I'll get there when I have to heal from big surgeries, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But where it's been a lot more internal and has really been something that's helped so much to navigate the landscape of chronic illness and some of the pieces of it, which now I'm heavily in, which you're heavily in, is parenting with chronic illness, like the day-to-day life of being fucking exhausted and trying to manage work, a household, your kids. And I think like that's part of with this, my invisible disease podcast is kind of really what we want to share, is like not only how we're managing it, but like that we're also in the fucking thick of it. Like we're struggling, and it's okay to struggle. Where through sharing your struggles, finding connection, finding community, it's different than complaining. And like I say, it's so weird because like I'm probably missing a million things in the story of like shit I've been through, because it's just,
Totally.
you just take it as you go. I mean, I probably had like 50 doctor's appointments this summer leading up to the transplant assessment. But it's one step in front of the other, like one step at a time. And I
There's
think
this quote, and I might be messing it up because like I always misquote everything.
Mm-hmm.
But as somebody who is like now in the middle of like uncontrolled, there's so many things that I cannot control. But what I can control is how I handle it.
Yeah.
And what I can control is how I talk about it and how I advocate for myself and how I can let people help me.
Yeah.
So I can decide whether or not I'm going to sit at home and, just like cry in my bed about all of the things that I can't do.
Yeah.
But like what I can do is I can, stock up on coloring books. So days that I can't get out of bed, we can snuggle in bed, watch movies and color. Or, like you can't control what happens to you. You can only control how you deal with it.
Absolutely.
And I think that for us, like we just need to like keep doing what we're doing and supporting each other and knowing that like we're not alone in this. There's a lot of people, and like our communities that we surround ourselves with is how we're going to get through it
Well, and I think it's
Like,
just not something that means it's still like, it just blows my mind. Like, mentally, trigger words like gut health, mental health, like these things were,
mhm.
10 years ago, not even on the table. But I still
Yeah.
feel like, especially for women, eh, that it's not the struggles is not something people talk about.
Totally.
You know, I'm on the other side and I'm going to share my story. That's great. And I think that can be inspiring, but like, there's a community of women that are in the thick of it, that are dealing with, and whether it's invisible for you or not. I mean, I say it's invisible, like we both shared physically, our bodies have changed, like, but how I present myself to the world, like, people probably have no idea that I'm sick.
Okay,
And
well, they can tell that I'm a little hurting, but they assume it's leg day. So, like,
yeah,
crawling up the stands at hockey on
yeah,
Saturday, I was like, oh, look at me.
yeah,
They
yeah,
can see. They just
yeah.
don't want to ask.
It's part of your new routine. Yeah. Like, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? And that's it. And people are afraid to ask, and people are afraid to have these conversations. And I think women naturally mask it. We hide it. It's somehow associated with failure. Our bodies are failing us. Like, we're failures, or, like the guilt of not being able to do it all, even though no one can do it all, no matter how
No.
healthy they are.
Yeah.
But also like the shame for, like, why is this, there's this cloud of shame. And I think, it's being able to reclaim this space of ditching the guilt, of ditching the shame, of finding that, and like we kind of mentioned this too before, talk about empowerment of, and advocating for yourself and for the things you can control. I have spent years with like here and there with different doctors, and I advocate for myself for medications, for like different things. I also advocate for myself, like you said, a lot more on the natural world side of things, because I think everything's holistic. And I think, absolutely clearly Western medicine, I need a transplant. Like, that is 100% something that's going to feed me on my journey, but that there's also room to do some of the work or some healing, or ways to explore a holistic aspect of these things. And that is also coming to the mental, the emotional, the spiritual side of it. And I think as women, that is such a big driver in our lives, and chronic illness can be so consuming. But creating a space where, to connect with other people going through this shit, and having shitty ass days where they don't want to get out of bed, or they can't get out of bed, and you have the guilt of your kids knocking on the door waiting for breakfast. Like, you know what? It's part of life. This is our human experience. And there's a whole whack of women, like, statistically, chronic illness is on the rise. Like, it's not declining. Like, this is becoming something that's more and more prevalent in people's lives. But I mean, I'm excited with you even just to talk about, like, how this affects relationships, how it affects parenting. We're both on our journeys. We're not
Mhm.
on the other side. Like,
Yeah, this is not a situation where we get to laugh about, oh, remember back in the day? Like, I look forward to those days. Like, I
yeah,
was
me
saying to
too.
Jesse, like,
Our
this is
spa trip that
we have a to-do list here, but
yeah.
I was saying to Jesse, I'm like, once again, because the guilt of a spouse, it's like, we're going to get through this. We're going to, be on the other side of this, and like worrying about these tests and that test. Like, we're going to look back and be like, that was crazy. Like, we went through some shit, and I can't wait until this is behind us. But the reality of the situation is, like, we don't know. I am completely undiagnosed as of today. I'm on a ton of medication treating something. And it's probably going to be my whole life based on like where they're leaning. And it's just how it is. Like,
yeah, it is
how
what
are
it
we going to
is.
get through this?
I say this all the time. As a community, and that is how we get through it. Like,
Yeah,
and
totally.
that's insane. It's like liver transplant, fucking huge thing. Okay, that happens. I still need a kidney transplant. Like,
Yeah.
it's like what? I thought
I still have to get the
thought I'm on the other
transplant.
side, right? So it's like, yeah, it's a journey, and it is very much like mapping out those pit stops that are harder than others, but also, keeping keeping ourselves accountable for our own mental health. And sometimes we need help with that. Sometimes we need support. Sometimes we need inspiration to get us through. But yeah, I think that's also why we are doing this for,
It's true.
My invisible disease.
Yeah. Yeah. When we were like sitting in the car that day, like crying because I'm not going to go for a hike, and
Yeah.
like how sad I was going to be. Like I couldn't take my kids for like a walk to look at leaves. Like if you have a 3 or 5-year-old, you know that like leaves and sticks, so at least in our house, are like the coolest thing you can find. And like that day, like it's all I could think about. Like, we're not going for a fall walk this year. And that fucking sucks. Like they're not going to like smell that fall morning, like smell that we love. They're not going to be, I'm not getting down there to take pictures of mushrooms or frogs or, like that was a really hard day for me. And I think that like when we were having that conversation, it was just like, I get it. I hear you. I see you. And like, things got a little bit morbid. Let's face it. I was like, oh, when I die, who's going to take my kids for a walk?
But that's part of it. It's part of the process. And I think like, that's part of us being human. And I think we'd be lying to say those thoughts aren't in the back of our heads, and that there shouldn't be shame to talk about it. I mean, a bad attitude is something to be shameful about, so it's like,
I have a notoriously shitty attitude. My husband tells me every day, he's like, you and your bad attitude. That's why our 3-year-old tells you every day that you're not her best friend. No,
you slice it with sarcasm.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like our attitude is huge, and our mentality is huge. And I think that one of the things that we can do to keep ourselves strong and like on the right path is just to reach out when we need help and talk to people and listen to people and share our stories. Because like for me, you're one of my best friends. You're bridesmaid in my goddamn wedding. Like we have been through so much. We watch each other grow families, this, that, and the other thing. Have coffee. I complain a little bit. I tell you, oh yeah, I've been having some like weird muscle things going on. And then before we know it, we're having conversations about like this biopsy and this, like, it's like, when did things get so bad?
Yeah.
And then
I think on that note though, like it can also be like moving through this can be so isolating, but also through some of those friendships, sometimes it's like you don't get it till you get it. And it can be like really hard to humor the world when you're carrying something really heavy and other people don't get it. And it's just, and then they're complaining about work. And it's like, I wish I could fucking work a full day right now. You know what I mean? Well, like, it's like priorities change. Yeah.
You shared a couple things on, I think it was TikTok, and you're like, one thing that I did for myself, like with chronic illness, is I got fake eyelashes. And, you kind of start talking about like how we're getting through this. And then in your DMs comes a long lost acquaintance who's sitting in a chemo chair.
Yeah.
And like, share a little bit about that. Like, how did that affect you?
Well, I think it just really, I think it just is part of that space that there's no place to go right now that says, oh, when you're diagnosed, like your key players in it are your doctors, and then your poor spouse or like partners or close friends that have like no fucking clue what's going on, and they're trying to help you, but they don't know how. And it's like, that's most people's experience. So having a place, a space to share and to vent and to also identify sameness, likeness, like to see your humanity reflected in others that are going through the same struggles, I think is so important. But also I think there's just not enough of it right now. People don't know where to go. And I think when you can share and sometimes be vulnerable and sometimes put your dirty laundry out there, some people are going to hate it and unfollow or ignore, but there's going to be other people that resonate with it and say, holy shit, they're going through it too. I would have had no idea.
So
doors and like
there's this realtor from my previous brokerage, and her and I had connected like very passively. Like she's a great girl. I think she's an amazing professional, and like professionally, she's crushing it. And I don't know how we ended up in the DMs, and I had switched brokerages. And she was like, hey, like, why did you leave? The one I was with before was quite expensive. I was in a very like high paced environment, a lot of pressure, and shit hit the fan, and I needed out. I could not afford to pay my monthly brokerage fee and recover at the same time. Like that is the reality of my situation. Like it costs me $1,300 a month to show up at work and not sell anything. So I had to make some changes. So she's like, why did you leave? Like, what is your plan? So in that moment, I decided, you know what, I'm going to be fucking honest. Like my natural instinct was to say, I just wanted to make more money, or, you know, like some fluffy excuse. But like at this moment, I decided to dial in some honesty and just say, like, I'm kind of like, I'm having some health concerns and I need to focus on me. And my high stress job is not doing it. So I need to reposition my business a little bit. And then I was taking the kids at a day home for the best summer ever and blah, blah, blah. But then the next thing you know, she's telling me, I'm currently being treated for breast cancer. I just got diagnosed. And I thought, what? You're crushing it. How on earth can you be getting cancer treatment? Like, wow. It was just one of those things that I was just like, you too? Yeah. And then in that moment, like we had this whole new bond, because now we've gone through the testing, and I was freaking out about a test I had coming up, like a PET scan. I don't know what that is, but I know that one of the things that they're looking for is a C word. And that terrified me to the core. And she was telling me about her experiences. And then I'm in like hospital treatment. She goes, wow, your treatment's so much more aggressive than mine. Oh, sorry, you have breast cancer and they're running a harder treatment on me? Like, what? And all of a sudden we're like bonding over this. And don't get me wrong, I don't have time to bond with 100 people in the DMs like every week. Like that's not my goal here. Let's make that clear. We'll get some resources set up for that. But I'm trying to run a business too, people. But like all of a sudden there was just somebody who understood what it was like to be trying to keep her business running, trying to keep the show going. But oh my God, like the amount of the sitting duck on the surface, it's all cool. She would have assumed I was healthy. Business is great. Like so excited. And then there's my little duck feet just going. And she's the same. She's another duck. Like it was so nice to be able to relate to somebody that just like asks stupid questions, or have anybody understand what it's like to give blood twice a week or 3 times a week. How many vials is the most amount of vials you've ever had? Like,
I love that our texts are like, I gave 11 today. What about you?
11 just vials. Dropped off 8 vials of blood.
Cassie, tip, drink lots of water before you go for blood work. Like this is the information we're sharing with each other. Make sure you're super hydrated so it's not as painful and they get all the blood they need. Like
exactly.
No, and I think it just that's it. And there's people like you feel how isolating and scary these situations can be for anybody, and then to not have community behind it, like that's probably one of the biggest things. So if you're looking for community, you can check us out on myinvisibledisease.com and sign up for our newsletter. We also have a Facebook group called My Invisible Disease. So you can check us out there, join to share your journey. But the difference is I think so many people keep it quiet because we don't want to burden others with our experience. And it's like,
burden us. Come on over. Like we want to hear from you. We want to share with you. We want you to feel seen, because
that's it. It's not a burden. Like it's when you can share your truth, it's empowering. People see you authentically. And that's when connections are made. That's when those true heart, compassion, empathy, the true connections are made. And it's sharing your truth, it's sharing your experience. it just, we want to create a space where people can stop hiding, and it's not burdening and it's not stressing, and you don't have to worry about people ignoring and going on their day and it feeling hurtful.
Also, nobody understands what it's like to be fucking stuck on a toilet. Like, I know you can go potty all by yourself, but yeah. I'm not a big girl. So, there's a level of, we're the only ones that get it. Like,
yeah, well, but I mean, like after hysterectomy and different things like that, I thought I was going to shit out my vagina, but there are experiences where other people can relate, maybe just in a different way. It brings us back to being human, but like, as I say, we're more than just this physical body. And so, yeah.
Yeah, we're more than our invisible disease. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Hey mamas, we see you. And we want you to join our Facebook community where we can connect and continue the conversation.
Join our private Facebook group at My Invisible Disease, because no one should go through this alone.
Thank you for listening, and check us out at myinvisibledisease.com.